Herbie, how you doing?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks so much for joining us. And we were just discussing this before you jumped on. Do you think if Georgia and Alabama remained undefeated, got to an SEC title game, played a really good game, that the loser could also make the college football playoff?
Yeah, quite possibly. You have to remember that I think there's a bit of confusion still with what the committee is looking at, what they're asked to try to do. I think that there are a lot of people that get confused with if there's a group of teams that are similar resumes. They then look at head-to-head and are you a conference champion? And those are supposed to be kind of things that they use to separate teams that are very tightly kind of in a bundle of they have similar resumes. But the committee's challenge is to pick the best 4 teams, not necessarily the most deserving, the best 4 teams. However those 13 people evaluate best, that's what they're supposed to do. And I think some people think, well, if you're a conference champion, you should be in automatically. Well, we have 5 Power 5 conferences. So how can all the conference champions be in? You can't. So someone's already left out. And when you throw Notre Dame potentially in there, now you potentially have 2 of the Power 5 conference champions left out. And now you're potentially talking about undefeated Georgia and undefeated Alabama, who a lot of people clearly think are 2 of the best teams in the country. And under your scenario, they play head-to-head, and they go back and forth, comes down to a last-second field goal, and one of them wins and one of them loses. There's a very strong possibility that the committee would look at that and say, hey, we're asked to give the best 4 teams. How can we say that, let's say it's Georgia, loses by a field goal to Alabama late, and that's number 1 against number 2, and we're supposed to say that because they lost on a last-second field goal, they're now not one of the top 4 teams in the country. So there is a possibility that could happen. Georgia's got to be able to beat Auburn this weekend, and Alabama's got to beat Auburn in a couple weeks. Both of those teams are playing Auburn on the road in Jordan-Hare. But it's possible that the committee could put both of those teams in if that happens.
You had been pretty adamant on ESPN that if Notre Dame ended up with just 1 loss, they would definitely find their way into the college football playoff. And you were just kind of talking about breaking the tie of 1-loss teams in that bundle. So you don't think that a lack of a 13th data point, which is really why the Big 12 created their championship game, would end up keeping out Notre Dame? Why not?
Well, I think, number 1, I think you have to look at their schedule and what they've done. Playing Georgia at home, the top team in the country right now, and losing to them by 1 point, going on the road and taking care of business against Michigan State, dominating USC the way they did. They really set USC back, and now USC has been able to kind of right the ship, and it looks like they're headed to a Pac-12 championship game against Washington. They blew them out 49-14. The next week they played NC State, who's become a very competitive team in the ACC, a top 15 team at the time. They blew them out. Now they've got Miami, who's a top 7 team, playing them on the road. If they beat them, then they get Stanford again on the road. I personally, I'm not into data points. I'm just into watching teams play. I'd have no issue at all if they're sitting there 11-1 without a conference or a conference championship, based on what they've been through and that resume. They'll have to play some pretty good football to be able to get through all those games. And 11-1, I think they would be deserving of being in the top 4.
ESPN's Kirk Herbstreit is our guest here on the DA Show on CBS Sports Radio. Oklahoma TCU, that's the big matchup of the Big 12 this weekend. But everybody's wondering, is there any defense to be played in the Big 12, and can that hinder them when we get to a college football playoff? Do you mark down Oklahoma because they haven't had or shown a decent defense?
Yeah, and early in the year they were playing really good defense, and that's really almost caught up to them. Other than the Iowa State game, it's almost got them in some other games. Their Ohio State performance is the reason that I think they were able to be in this discussion and put them up into that top 5. They dominated Ohio State, especially in that fourth quarter, beat them 31-16. What people that don't follow Oklahoma every week, what they maybe fail to realize is after that, they've had to outscore people. They beat Baylor on the road in Waco, and they were in a dogfight. Ended up outscoring them 49-41. The next week they lose to Iowa State. The next week, rivalry game against Texas where they win. Next week they're on the road at Kansas State, who's a good team, not a great team. You have to outscore them 42-35. Then of course Bedlam last week. You imagine being Mike Gundy, give up 50 or score 52 points. You think you got a pretty good chance to win the game by scoring 52, and they get outscored 62-52.
You lose by double digits.
Now, yeah. And now you got TCU with Gary Patterson, who probably has maybe the best defense in the Big 12. I equate Oklahoma to a team in March Madness that shoots the three, and they're blowing people out, in the first round, the second round by 50 points because they're hitting the three, run and gun. And all of a sudden, what happens if they run into that game where the threes aren't dropping? Do they have a half-court offense? Do they have anything to fall back on to be able to allow them to win a game? If they ever play, let's say this weekend against TCU, and Baker Mayfield and the Sooners aren't scoring every possession, are they still going to be able to kind of win a low-scoring game against a defensive-minded team? I'm a big believer still that defenses win championships. If you look at the playoff, other than Oklahoma in 15, the other 11 teams have played really, really sound defense. And with Oklahoma right now, that's not quite the case. So they just have to outscore people. Now, with all that being said, if they beat TCU and Kansas and West Virginia, and they go into the Big 12 championship and they win that game, teams ahead of them are going to lose. And there's a very strong possibility that if they become Big 12 champs, they still have a very good chance of making it into the playoffs.
Kirk Herbstreit joins us from ESPN. He's working alongside Coors Light. They've got a brand new app, Coors Light XP. Herbie, talk to us about this. What's going on here?
Yeah, it's I've been working with Coors Light now for a couple of years. You mentioned that they've partnered with more than 40 college programs, and the new app that came out, the Coors Light XP app, came out in August. And what we're asking people to do is, if you download that app, all you have to do is look for it in the App Store, Coors Light or Coors Light XP. And if you use my special code, quote, Kirk Football, by the end of Friday, they'll let you earn an extra 100 points. And just a lot of fun and a great way for the fans to get kind of involved with college football, thanks to Coors Light.
All right, so Coors Light XP, use that code word, Kirk Football, earn some points. Coors Light XP on the app or Google Play Store. Download the app right now and start earning some points. Hashtag Coors Light XP rewards on social media channels. Kirk, good to catch up, buddy. Thanks so much. Enjoy college football this weekend.
Yes, sir. Great talking to you. Have a great one.
Okay, Kirk Herbstreit joining us from ESPN.